Just waiting for Dennis to do this radio show. It's a nice picture, but it needs something. Perfect.
One of the things I want to do is I want to kind of welcome everybody back because we took a couple of weeks off here for the holidays. So hopefully everybody had a Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah and a Happy New Year. And we are kicking it off with a bang, I think, because we have, I think, one of the most important guests we've ever had on this show come join us today. And we are honored to have House Representative Chip LaMarca come and join us today. So thank you very much.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Hey, how'd your holidays go?
You know, it was fantastic. We stayed here with the family, enjoyed from Christmas through New Year's.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know what day the next day was because obviously you lose track of time if you're not working every day. But
it's a good feeling sometimes.
It is. It's nice to be disconnected a little bit, but back up to speed now and ready to get up to Tallahassee next week and start doing the people's work.
So when you go up there, I mean, how long are you up there for?
So we kind of the legislative process is this. We're employed all year long as a state representative. We have 6 committee weeks separated by about 4 months, 3 or 4 months prior to session. So this year it's all early. It's moved up. So we started in September, October, November, and finished our last committee week early December. And then we've been off, and we go back to Tallahassee for the legislative session, which is 60 days. By law, it's we've got to finish the session and come up with a budget, and it's supposed to sine die, which is the end of session, by 60 days, which would be March 13th. So we go up mid-January to mid-March. We'll say presidential or gubernatorial election years, we go up March and April. So it's a little earlier. It's gonna be cold up there.
Yeah,
for us South Florida guys. You know?
Yeah, Tallahassee gets cold.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time up there.
It was funny. We went up last year. It was a regular year, March through end of April, early May, and Cora and I are cleaning our stuff out and coming home. And I said, "What's this overcoat for?" You know, because it was like 78, 80 degrees in the daytime and humid, and it's a swamp up there, just like other places. But it gets colder in the winter. It's really South Georgia more than it is North Florida.
Yeah, when those fronts come through up in Tallahassee, it's it can bite you.
And then fortunately there's no ocean to go hang out in.
Yeah. Well, you have to go down. What is it, St. Mark's?
Well, there's I've got some friends that have places like St. Teresa Beach and just south of Tallahassee. So you're kind of around Alligator Point, I think it is, and there's it's the Gulf. It's still a body of water. It's great.
It's pretty up there though, the way the hills go and the trees and everything like that.
It is
high road and all that. Yeah. That's really nice.
A lot interesting. A lot of folks certainly from down here, if you grew up in South Florida, have never been there. Everybody says, why does the Capitol situated in Tallahassee? And at the time that the Capitol was established, it was in between Pensacola and St. Augustine. So
really?
It was the high point and the center point of the two. It's almost 2.5 hours each way.
Yeah. So. That's interesting because I think a lot of people would say that if the Capitol were to go now, it'd probably be Orlando. But
the bright line's gonna terminate there, so it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But somebody has in the past the reason why we have the 22-story building in the middle of the newish from the early 70s Capitol is because somebody decided they wanted to move it to Orlando and ran a bill, and they quickly built the new building, and it'll be there for a while.
Oh, we're invested. We can't move. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess that's how it goes. So I want to officially welcome you to Connected by Water, sponsored by Joey Accardi, Chrysler Job, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Subaru. Right, I'm still fumbling over that.
Been a little while since you said it.
It's been a little while. It's been a couple of weeks since I had to say that, though. Joey does sponsor the show, and he does a great job in supporting us. Yeah, absolutely. He's a great member of the town, the community. So, I just wanted to throw that shout out there. I forgot to do that right in the beginning. So, we don't get too political on this show, as you know, right? It's a very casual kind of thing. So, for me to actually bring, I guess, politician on the show, it's kind of like, goes against the grain for us. But, it's not like out of the realm for me to do this because you're an advocate for clean water. Right? We're advocates for clean water. So I wanted to kind of bring you on a little bit to discuss that at really any level, because we're big DeSantis fans on this show. And I think that a lot of the things that he's done right off the bat have been phenomenal for this state. I mean, the state's in a very good position right now economically. and clean water. Environmentally, we're in a very good position right now. A lot of it, I think, has to do with actions like him or that he's done, actions that you've done. And I just want, first of all, thank you for all the great work that you guys have been doing.
This governor, I'll put you at ease about the political stuff. I consider the work that I'm blessed to do as public service. So public servant more than a politician. Probably my least favorite part of being in elected office is getting elected, that process and, campaigning and all that. But, this governor has specifically made it easy, and he's made it cool for people who happen to be registered Republicans like myself, the last one in Broward County, but to embrace and love the environment and to talk about it. I'd been
because
talking
we
about,
do. Yeah, I think it's a big misnomer.
I've been talking about sea level issues and climate issues for a number of years, dozen years since I've been in elected office at the county, and we really need to stop thinking about some of those things as political fodder, because they really aren't. I mean, we're all affected by the same climate, the same sea level issues if we live in coastal Broward, whether you're Democrat, Independent, or Republican.
Yeah, no, so. I agree. I mean, it's something that affects us all. It's something that if you don't keep a tight watch on, especially as our state sprawls in the way it's been sprawling lately. It's always been sprawling, but really a lot lately. Yeah. And I think that has a lot to do with a lot of the issues that we have. We're facing some of those issues currently in Fort Lauderdale. About how we need to maintain what we have. We had recently some folks from Pompano Beach. We had Rex Harden on here and Horatio Danovich of the CRA, and they got into a little bit of some of the sewer issues and some of the things that Pompano Beach has tried to done recently with resurrecting these things or maintaining and restoring them. Horatio mentioned that, we don't have the same. He used to be in New York, right? So he mentioned that we don't have the same problems that New York does because all that sewage is in granite. So some of those sewer pipes, they've been around for 200 years and they're totally fine. They don't have the same saltwater issues because they're locked in granite. But here we're in sand, and we have some different issues. We've had some water main breaks recently in Fort Lauderdale. And I was hoping you can kind of maybe shed a little bit of light or give some of your insight on some of the things that are going on and maybe some of the things that we need to do to help avoid this in the future.
Well, thanks for that. So I think we're all kind of products of where we've been and what we've done. And I started my professional career. I spent 30 years in construction, but started off in the environmental world and worked with a lot of hydrogeologists and PGs, and did a lot of underground work with construction and with fuel systems and other things where you're dealing with a fragile, underground. And the ability for us to have a little bit of, in my case, to have a little bit of understanding of the different aquifers and what we're dealing with if we drill a hole straight down into the ground, and dealing with where a lot of these water pipes and other issues are in Fort Lauderdale, it has been helpful to me because I look at it. I think science is a great thing. It's a factual. It's a factual process, and you try to get to a point where you're looking at things. And I know in Fort Lauderdale they've had half dozen or so breaks in the course of, unfortunately it was all pretty much during the entire holidays. Yeah. And, the results were bad. They could be worse. It could be catastrophic. And the conversation, to your point earlier about, politics, invariably goes back to whether this is an overdevelopment issue or that type of issue. And everything I have seen with what's going on in Fort Lauderdale, it's not a capacity issue. I'm not taking a stand one way or the other on, whether they should build the next project or whatnot, but it's less of a capacity issue and more of an age issue. Those water lines, those wastewater lines, those sewer lines, they have, if you were to go sell that system to bond it, and there are institutions that do those type of projects. We actually had some up in Tallahassee presenting to us. They need to be somewhere in a 30 to 40 year lifespan. Well, some of those pipes are 50, 60 years old. Wow. So they're worthless on the open market. And because of the breaks and the issues they're having, structural integrity problems, they need to be replaced. Yeah. So I don't think there's
no other way around it.
No.
Yeah, because I think they've been trying to put Band-Aids on this thing for a long time, right?
They've put saddles on them. They've put different types of wrappings and whatnot. They're ductile iron, so they're failing. They're not. Some of the large one down in Rio Vista is 54 inches in diameter.
Wow.
So 4 foot, 4.5 feet tall. You could stand in that pipe. So basically, that pipe has been failing. The real issue that I see, obviously, it's a terrible situation for people, the healthcare, the health environment down there. But to me, the biggest issue is it came out yesterday. It was 126 million gallons of raw sewage went into our waterways.
That's insane.
It is. And I can recall. Grew up down here, moved here when I was 3. Going through the canals in Wilton Manors and Fort Lauderdale and, water skiing in the Intracoastal. And, we didn't have the big boats like we have today, but I mean, you'd literally be in those same waters, and the sandbar off the Lauderdale Yacht Club, that down there by Pier 66. It's a bad situation.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to get a hold of it. We had a similar issue, not at the city of Pompano Beach's fault, but an issue we had to deal with there from a contractor when the 95 expansion was going on. So, what we do need to do, and you bring up the governor, we need to keep the state DEP informed of any of these issues, because what we don't want to do is try to hide something or try to cover something up. And I'm not saying either of those have tried to do that, but the folks at DEP can be very helpful. They're all on the same side. We all want to keep our waterways clean, but when we have a situation like this, we've got to be able to act quickly.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, because there's a couple of points I want to touch on too with that. If you look at Florida, just compared to the rest of the United States, I always say that we're the last frontier of the country, which is odd because there's a lot of people here now. We got roughly the same amount of population in the state of Florida as we do in the entire country of Australia, which is mind blowing. You've seen recently some of those posts of people overlaying the map of Australia over, the United States, were roughly about the same amount.
Yeah,
same size, same amount of space, but that little thing on the end has just as much people in it as that entire landmass does, and that's crazy to me. But we weren't really developed until recently compared to the rest of the United States. I mean, Flagler started building his railroad in the early 1900s and late 1800s, if that. We really couldn't build down here. They figured out a way, and
air conditioning.
Yeah, air conditioning. Isn't there a statue of the guy who invented air conditioning up at the Capitol building? Right.
There is. I don't think his name is Carrier, but maybe. But it was the inventor of modern air conditioning system, and until recently a Civil War general who has now been replaced by Mary Bethune Cookman.
Oh wow! Yeah. Wow. So the guy who invented air conditioning is a Floridian. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
We've contributed to the better of all mankind.
Well, when I don't know if you traveled north at all this year, but every time I'm cold and it takes hours upon hours to really warm up, I think back and say, well, I always get so frustrated that it's if you put a suit on or a tie or a jacket and go out into the sun, go out into the Florida summer to get into the car, you're melting.
Yeah.
But you realize that you cool down in 10 minutes in the car and you're all is good. So I think air conditioning is much better than heat.
Yeah, I think just a little bit, right?
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Before my ADD completely kicks in too, I just wanted to mention, you talk about cold. We brought the kids to this Gaylord Palms.
Yeah.
Over the break.
In Tennessee?
No, we're here in Orlando.
Okay.
To see the Polar Express, the ice exhibit. I was so cold.
Inside?
They get it down to 9 degrees.
Wow.
Right, yeah. So they give you these, we dressed for winter, and then they give you these parkas to put on top of it, but you got to bring gloves and everything. 'Cause I took the gloves off at one point to do videos and pictures of the kids. My hands started turning into a rock. That's a Floridian talking.
You have to get the hand warmers.
Oh, so bad. It was so bad. Anyway, the other thing, my point of what I was trying to make before was that we're still in the early development stages of Florida as far as the structural development. So everything is new. You don't see things from the 1800s much around here. You don't see things, even the early 1900s, you hardly see around. Everything here is from the 50s. So we're at that point where we need to start addressing all these things, because when Florida was developed 40 years ago,
Right.
30 years ago, I mean, the city of Coral Springs is what, 40 years old?
40 going to maybe 50,
something like that. Yeah.
50.
So I mean, it's not very old.
This was the Wild West when I grew up in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, they called it the city in the country, I think, and then Johnny Carson came out and put the first shovel on the ground. But yeah, so I mean, we're at that point where we need to start looking at things like that. You know,
you bring up a good point, and that I've been asked a lot of times, like, why or how did you get involved in politics? I wasn't a political junkie as a kid. I didn't watch too much of the news. I surfed, I skateboarded, played music.
Yep.
I was interested in automotive design and engineering, and didn't really have an interest in politics. Settled into Lighthouse Point after I got married, my wife and I, in 1994, and about 3 or 4 years into it, kind of paid attention to what was going on in the city like anybody else would. Our tax dollars going to this little community here. And there were some significant infrastructure programs that needed to be implemented for replacement. So some bridge replacements. The old bridges that were there were about 50 years old. The city was getting ready to turn 50 years in 2006. And I said, I looked up on the city commission. I'd been going to meetings and just interested more than anything else. And what I realized is we had some great people representing our city, but we had a fundraiser, a former teacher, former corporate person in there, and kind of looked around. I said, well, there's nobody with any construction background. I'm not a contractor by trade, but been in the construction industry my whole life. And, I said, well, maybe I can add something to it. So specifically because of infrastructure replacement is why I got involved in politics. And, it's kind of spun out of control since then. But that being said, I mean, it's something that I think the average taxpayer, voter, resident, human being who lives in Broward County, regardless of their ideology or fiscal concerns, will understand if it's properly positioned to them and properly presented to them. That look, we have 60-year-old pipes, for example, if it's a city issue in Fort Lauderdale, and they need to be replaced. It's going to cost X number of dollars over 20 years or 30 years, but the first 2 to 5 years, we have a crisis over here on this main sewer line, and we have to replace this. So I think like anything else, if you tell them what's going to cost and how long it's going to take to do, and you stay on top of it, and you have kind of an oversight function where people can see where their money's going, I think they'll understand that. But to the deeper point, other than just the fiscal and the interruption of daily life, we're dealing with the alternative is we're putting raw sewage into our waterways, and we can't do that. So
yeah. That's interesting. When did you first get into politics?
So I did some appointments and board service in Lighthouse Point, and then I ran for the city commission in 2005.
2005.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've been doing it ever since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did the city commission for 6 years, and then ran for a seat in the county commission, which was unlikely campaign to win, but we worked hard and we were able to do it. Served 2 terms there, and then ran for the state house. So I'm enjoying the fact that I can serve and trying to move some some of these ideas, or these fixed ideas of what a person or a person registered a certain way should be,
right,
and trying to move it into, look, these are just, nothing's black and white.
Right.
Everything is shades of gray, and you can be a good fiscal steward of people's money, and even be a little cheap at times with other people's money, and at the same time care about the environment and care about our human element of our community. And at Broward County, we had a lot of that. It was very rarely was it like partisan politics, but a lot of the times it was dealing with homeless issues. It was dealing with the environment, an airport, a seaport. It was pretty good training.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's really the truest test of any politician is the ability to, I think, reach across the aisle and not really get blinded too much about rhetoric, and say what's the right thing or the wrong thing to do. And
well, there's no doubt I had to do that at Broward County, because I was the only one on my side of the aisle. But I've taken that same understanding of, look, I had to do it there. Now I'm in the majority in the legislature. If somebody has a good idea, it's just a good idea. One of the new school board members who lost her daughter at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas has put up an idea for safety, public safety mechanism or a security buzzer for a legislative item, and a Democrat member from Broward County has put it up, and I co-sponsored it with him. There was no other Republican on there, and I mean, we can't look at something like school safety as being one side or the other. It's definitely not. The kids aren't making that decision.
That's such a delicate topic. I mean, especially in light of what happened. I mean, it's so hard to present an argument, with a black and white, scenario. Just like you said, I mean, there's literally the funeral home 2 doors down. I mean, about half of the ceremonies happened there, and we had to go out a different way, like so many times, like in the weeks following that event. It really does hit home. I mean,
I wasn't in the legislature that year. I was still on the county commission, but what I was proud of people on all sides of the political aisle in Tallahassee was the fact that leadership worked together to get something comprehensive done. I certainly have 2 ears when it comes to my folks I represent in Broward County, regardless of politics. And there was a school safety bill last year, for example, that would enable teachers to be trained to be guardians. And ultimately, I kind of looked at it and I said, well, listen, I know that Broward County is going to opt out of this, but that's not really enough. I understand there are other parts of the state where this was a necessity, but I feel if we're going to properly invest, just like our environment, if we're going to properly invest in keeping our kids safe, they need to be police officers.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I know, banning or arming the teachers, is, in my mind, you don't have to speak about it. In my mind, that's a knee-jerk decision. And I don't think that's no decision should be made in a knee-jerk fashion in that scenario.
Well, it goes back to your last, final frontier and my point of many different Floridas.
Yeah,
Broward County is certainly different than Baker County and Pasco County. So, some of these type of issues shouldn't be made at the state level. Where we live and the culture of where we live is very different in some places. So, while I'm a person that believes in home rule, some things need to be dealt with at the state level for the entire state, but we should still have local control over a lot of these issues at home.
And that speaks to the importance of local governments. That speaks to the importance of the Electoral College. It speaks to the importance of a lot of things like that when certain decisions need to be made based upon, what the land and what the people are in that region, for sure.
Yeah. Now, there is a very, very important role for local government, and one of the things that I've had a little bit of fun with some of the other state House members, because they go up there and some go up there and they want to basically get rid of local government. I said, well, what happened after that hurricane when all the trees and all the debris was all over the roads? You couldn't get anywhere. Did the state government come in and clean it out for you, or the federal government? They didn't. It's local government and having contracts with debris cleanup and get your waste out of there and things like that. So it's a good time to let folks understand that there are different levels of government that should take care of different things.
Yeah, and the scenarios like you just presented just really speaks to small business as well. Small business benefits from that as well, which is the cornerstone, I think, of the middle class. So. One important thing, you talk about doing special things. One important thing that I know that you just accomplished recently is with the coastal. What's the title of the
coastal management?
The coastal management.
The bill,
bill that you guys just passed. I mean, can you kind of elaborate on that and what that means for everybody?
Yeah. So
we're proud of the fact that you got that done, and that's really great.
I appreciate that. So that was it was one of those years last year where the governor did such a good job. Like a typical year might have $200 and change or so $1 million in it for the environment. And last year, Governor DeSantis had a request of like $625 million. We ended up putting $686.5 million in environmental issues, and most of it was water protection, water cleanup, clean water issues, doing some of the projects that would deal with the water issues north of the lake, and $50 million of that was for beach restoration. And I spent 8 years on the county commission. And to your point about like the political world, I said, well, what's something I can do that no one's going to vote against, No one's, you call it reaching over the aisle, but who's going to vote against beaches, even if you live in Weston or Parkland or Coral Springs?
Right.
We realize that a lot of our economic revenues come through tourists come to our beach, and it's also a quality of life issue. But what I realized, especially after Superstorm Sandy, and we didn't see it here in South Florida, but a month after the storm, there were still weather effects from that storm that wiped out a half mile of Fort Lauderdale Beach, and A1A was undermined, and people couldn't actually drive to their houses because the road was closed. And
I remember that.
Yeah.
The dunes over the A1A.
yeah.
And,
So prior to that, no one wanted dunes in the finger streets there, like between 14th and 18th Street. And
Right.
were good friends of mine, but nobody wanted to lose their view of the Atlantic Ocean. And after that, we've got these beautiful dunes that also give them something to look at and also protect their upland property. So anyway, the guts of the bill were something that my predecessor in this seat, Representative Moritas, had been working on getting funding. So he and I worked together, county and state, to get funding for beach projects. And the way it works is there's a list, a priority list that goes through the state. So if you have erosion or scarping or issues at your beach, or dunes that need to be replaced, or hot spots from Pensacola all the way around the coast, all the way up to Nassau County, there's a statewide program, and it depending on where it is in the list, it would get funded this year, next year, 5 years out. Permitting is also an issue, so we'll continue to work on that. But the funding issue was we needed to basically have, with 125 to 150 million in projects over the course of 3 years, we'd need to have $50 million was our mark per year to clear out a third of those projects. So every 3 years, that list would get cleared out. But what was really important, not just the funding piece, but making sure that people understood what the economic impact of their beach was to their community. So there's an environmental issue, and there's also an economic issue. And what this bill did was it did not pit St. Pete Beach against Fort Lauderdale Beach, but it said, what does Fort Lauderdale Beach bring in economic value to the Fort Lauderdale community or greater Fort Lauderdale community? And so that component would raise or lower the priority. All the rest is science with FDEP saying, all right, whether permits are in place. And so if Fort Lauderdale, Pompano, and Lauderdale by the Sea, where we did, which is called Segment 2 between Hillsborough Inlet and Port Everglades, was 3 segments in Broward. And what that meant to our community raised that level of that project up, as well as like the sand bypass from north to south of Port Everglades. So that bill got passed. The governor signed it, and so ultimately, with the funds in that account every year, it's recurring. We'll be able to clear these beach projects and hopefully protect upland property, people's houses, the environmental aspect of it, and quite honestly, we'd like to have pristine beaches in Florida.
Yeah, exactly. That's phenomenal.
So it's cold. It's cold up north right now. Come down and enjoy our beaches.
Yep, that's great. Good work. I mean, that's got to be exciting, putting a bill like that through and getting it passed, and and getting it all done and doing the work, and and having it like
we had a good infrastructure. Yeah. So what had happened prior to this and why it was so helpful is we had a kind of a consortium of county commissioners that we put together, again from Pensacola all the way around to the Georgia border, of 7 different districts, and we got a county commissioner from each one, and we stormed the Hill in Tallahassee for years as a county commissioner. So once I got in the seat where I was receiving these requests, those folks were our advocates. So when we went to committees, every bill has to go through 2 or 3 committees, typically for policy or process, and then for appropriation. And both in committees and on the floor of the Florida House, we didn't receive 1 no vote. So it's an issue that people understood we need to take care of our beaches, whether you're a fiscal conservative or a social, wherever you are on the issues.
No, I hear you.
They just it didn't. It was not one of those issues, and there was no debate.
Now, wasn't this though? This had to be presented though in the right way though. Wasn't this is something that we've been trying to do for a long time though, isn't it?
It is.
But you're able to get it done, which is
great. I think the salt, as opposed to the pepper in the hair, brings a little bit of the experience brings a little bit of the ability to sit down with some, if there was an opponent, but there was typically times you'd have to have a conversation of why something was so important, and they would say, well, this is to do your beach. I'm like, no, ours is done.
Right.
This is so you can do your beach or your neighbors or Pensacola or Jacksonville. So it's an issue that was It's ultimately an important issue for the economic impact of Florida as well as the environment and our quality of life. I think it's so. That was but one. We had a hazing bill that was successful last year. We had some other good bills, but we've got some coming up this year. They're going to be exciting.
Yeah. Any you can share or elaborate? Nothing you can talk about yet?
So everything's filed. We've got a few of the exciting ones. We've got, believe it or not, there are places in the state of Florida where homeowners associations will not allow someone to bring their marked police car home. So
Really?
We're working with a member of the Florida Senate from Pinellas County. Every bill has to have a House and a Senate sponsor.
I can't stand homeowners associations.
So
sorry.
I live in Lighthouse Point. We don't have a homeowner association. We have a city government, and that's pretty much it. But there are some association issues that don't make sense, and this was one of them. So that should be a fairly well received bill and should get passed without any real issues. We've got a bill that would require when you come out and have work done after a storm or any type of damage, when an insurance claim is made, a lot of times the insurance check will sit in a bank or a mortgage holder's account for a period of time, and as you draw that down and get the work done, at the end of that, if say the number was $100,000 in damage and all that was paid out, and it took a year, the interest that money accrued while it was in there right now is not specifically required to go back to you, the insurance policy holder and the homeowner. The banks can keep it. They don't necessarily,
You're kidding me.
No. So federal guidelines say that they're supposed to return it. So
they do that rather than cutting a check, so they can. That's probably the reason that they
we're
put it
all
in
going to
that
say
account
it's
in the
just
first place, right?
pennies, right? But pennies add up, and when you have 100,000 homes damaged in Hurricane Michael, or hundreds of thousands in Hurricane Irma, we just want, at the end of the day, the folks that should have that money are the people who are paying the insurance premium. So there's that bill, and then we've got a bill that gets back to my environmental concerns, and it would allow counties, so 67 counties in the state, about relatively half of those or 60% of them are on coasts, and would allow counties to have say whether you can smoke or not smoke on the beach. Because right now it's preempted by the state. The local governments and even parks can't say no smoking on the beach. Have you ever done a beach cleanup? For the most part, 90% of what you pick up is cigarette butts.
Cigarette butts, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, few plastic bottles. I think we're getting a little smarter about that.
People think that it's a
giant
big
ashtray, right?
Yeah.
There's that, and working on that with a member from the Sarasota area from the Senate, and then probably the most exciting bill we're working on this year is to expose student athletes to the free market. It's called the Student Athlete Achievement Act. It is to allow student athletes the same rights and privileges in the free market that an engineering student on scholarship or a finance student on scholarship would have. And it would allow them to take advantage of the ability to use their name, image, and likeness as a student athlete, just like they would be if they were a student on full scholarship in engineering and they create an app or a program.
Yeah, I love that. That's going to do great things for recruiting in the state of Florida too.
So I'll tell you what. California passed a bill and they made it effective 2023.
Yeah. Can we make ours effective 2022?
No, we're making ours would be effective July of 2020.
Yeah. The Seminoles need next year right now.
Yeah, they need
so do the Hurricanes.
So what was interesting is as we're going through this and we want to make sure that we've met with all the Florida state ADs, so UF, FAU, FSU, Miami, UCF, USF.
How do they feel about all that?
Nobody's going to come out and have, pom-poms and say we're all for it, but most after they realize we're not trying to have, so there's zero connection between the school and the athlete to pay them to play. There's zero connection between the school and having a contract that would require any type of payment. We don't want to get into Title IX and jeopardize things, whether it's women's sports or sports that are not the top tier sports. Because a lot of sports you don't even have a zero scholarship to a partial.
Right.
But what we did see was a kind of an injustice. There's a UCF kicker who's not a UCF anymore. He went, he left because of this rule that basically he was making YouTube videos. but he was getting
because his original
3.1 million hits on this, and think about how to kick a football 64 yards,
wow.
right? I know a couple of NFL teams could use him right now.
Yeah,
but there was also a soccer star at Florida State who won a national championship, Dana Castellanos.
Mm-hmm.
She has 1.3 million Instagram followers, and she couldn't be an ambassador or influencer for could sell
crazy.
that can of Coke or a camera or could be non-sports related. But so she's, thankfully for her, she's now playing, and she graduated in December. She's now signed with the French national women's soccer team, and she'll do great things. But with the 4 years she was in school, she could have taken advantage of all that exposure.
Yeah, no, I agree with all the things that you're saying. I mean, it's as much as what people want to say that, oh, you're getting paid with the education, it's like, well, you kind of are, but
right.
Is that really balancing out? Because are you
really? So
So
few of them get, like, I think it's 60% get a full scholarship.
Yeah, 60% of them and like, are you really going to class the way the other students are going to class? I mean, or is the school really just using you and just saying, yeah, we're going to give you your degree or pass you through this? Because a lot of that happens. I mean, what's the term? They're not teachers; they're adjuncts. I guess is that the term? They're getting the adjuncts, and they're just going, okay, you showed up, you're in. Okay, you got an
And
A.
what's the degree in? I mean, can they get? My biggest thing in life is whether you're in the trades or you're in a skilled, certified, program of something, or you have a 4-year degree, or you're a doctor or lawyer. What's the value of that education? I mean, if you're a journeyman electrician and now you're become a master electrician, you probably make more money than the doctor or the lawyer.
Yeah,
but what's the value of whatever it is you're going to school for? If they pass you through with an exercise science degree and you don't want to be a personal trainer, what's the value of that degree? So we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to do something while they're in school. At the same time, this could actually keep some students in school. You might get these 3 and out. One more year, you can get your business degree,
right.
But the NFL is saying, hey, come now. Well, I'm going to stay one more year. But I'm going to also make a certain amount of money based on my sponsorship of whatever it might be, and then we've also looked into to make it fair for the universities and not say, well, you can't get sponsored by Adidas if you're FSU football player and you're a Nike school. So so we're trying to be cognizant of what makes them successful. But
that's good.
So if you're an Knoll fan, you can just go to the FAU games now and watch Willie Taggart do his thing. God.
Poor Willie.
When did they put all that money?
Oh
all that money that Oregon and Florida State and all the other teams that he's left, put that in a box and you can see right over the stadium.
I don't even know why he took another job. I'd go on vacation if I were him. I mean,
so I happen to know as an FAU alum, I happen to know that it was not the most lucrative contract, but the contract does come with a membership to the Boca Raton Resort and Club, so that's not bad.
Oh, really?
Right? I mean, it beats Tallahassee.
That's lovely.
So
that's kind of nice.
Kiffin had a really good deal, but he'd rather be in swamps in Mississippi.
That upset me when he left.
Did you see the tweet when he was leaving?
No, what did he say?
I think it said "going home, hottie toddy." #hottie toddy, and had the Ole Miss jet tail with FAU Stadium in the background.
No,
yeah, that's kind of like, hey, appreciate everything, but not really. To me, he was very significant in building a great program here.
Yeah, he was.
Went to bowl games. They were successful.
So was Schnellenberger.
Yeah. And to lead, I think what do they say? It's how you perform when you lose is more indicative than how you perform if you win something. I think how you leave a good situation is just as important as the day that they sign you. So
yeah, I agree.
Anyway.
I agree.
I'm kind of used to that with Saban when he left the Dolphins.
Yeah. Oh, my God. That's another one. If I look at the Drew Brees situation with Saban, and I really think that's why he left at the end of the day. I mean, people say that he left because of his wife's influence and she wanted to move back to Alabama and all that. But I really think that if Huizinga would have let him choose his quarterback, because he chose Brees, and then Danny Cannell's dad, they said, no, we think Culpepper's the better. He's healthier. It's a more sure bet. And then Huizinga was like, I want the healthy guy. You know what I mean? And Saban's like, no, Brees is my quarterback. Long story, we all know how it happened. It fell out, right?
God bless Wayne, but you look at Drew Brees. He's played 18 years, right?
Yeah, And I think that if they would have let Saban make his own decisions, is probably one of the reasons why he decided to go back to Alabama, because he gets to make all the calls.
Yeah, but his helicopter keeps landing at Florida, at Gibbons and at St. Thomas. And
he's shopping
Heritage.
for his groceries down here.
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it would have been a really different tale for the Dolphins, because I think Saban is an amazing coach. And personally, if you're winning, what I mean? I'm not going to go out to dinner with the guy. I mean, I don't know. He could be however he wants, but I want the Dolphins to win. So
my understanding is he can't look at anything with a tiger in the logo anymore, though. He lost 2 or 3 games of Tigers, and said he won't even eat Frosted Flakes anymore.
Yep. Tigers versus Tigers in the bowl. Yeah. That's really interesting about the college thing. I mean, I'm kind of all for that. I think they at least got to be able to have a job. Work at Barnes and Noble.
So one of the other things we looked at is, all right, who's most affected by going to school, playing a sport, and then not having a future in that sport? Are sports that don't have a professional league, women's softball, rowing, lacrosse. I mean, there are a lot of sports, especially women's sports, that don't have a professional league. So you can't really say, well, you get your education and now you're going to go play professionally.
Yeah.
The football, basketball, baseball, even hockey, we understand that. I want to switch gears back to the environment for a second, if I could.
Yeah, by all means. Sorry,
that's all right.
You bring up football and college sports to me, like John and our ears perk up.
I see the Panthers bobblehead.
Yeah, we're
so
big fans.
My legislative aide is a beer league hockey champion. He's a goaltender out at the ice den, and he's a little injured right now. So that way I get to keep him in Tallahassee. So what's interesting is, outside of, you get 6 bill slots, but there's an infinite number of requests you can make for appropriations. It's something that goes back to before I got there. That's been kind of bothering me, that I've been trying to work on, and we didn't get it done last year. We're trying to do it this year. Is, believe it or not, in coastal Broward County and Lauderdale by the Sea, when the cities annexed kind of unincorporated Broward County, I want to say go back to 2000-ish. There's an area called the Palm Club in Lauderdale by the Sea, and it's a 55 and up community, and it's just north of Sea Ranch, and basically little homes, retirees, for the most part on a fixed income. There are 99 septic tanks still there, and they're leaking into the groundwater. They're leaking into the intracoastal.
Really?
So one of the governors, you brought up the governor's push to the environment. One of his priorities is getting rid of these septic tanks. Now, there are places around the state where the entire community is built on a septic system. Where we are in fragile coastal Broward with the environmental concerns that we do have, are, for the most part, up in my district anyway, this is the last place. And the town of Lauderdale by the Sea has been so fiscally responsible and replaced all of those tanks in south part of the town and other places, that we're trying to basically help them with this. And it's basically, I'll say this. I won't make an ask of the taxpayers of Florida or the legislature if somebody doesn't come in with at least a 50% match.
Okay.
A significant match. So Lauderdale by the Sea has put together 50% match and this project, which is interesting. They have their funds set aside. When I was at the county, I worked out where the county was willing to work out an arrangement with the city of Pompano Beach, where ironically my replacement, Lamar Fisher, was mayor at the time. We said, look, if we get the septic tanks out, they're going to have to go on wastewater. So right now their water is coming from, I believe, Fort Lauderdale, but their sewer would go to Pompano. And Pompano was able to put some dollars in. The county put some dollars in to help with this project. So it's more than it's about 60% funded on the local government side. So that's one of the things I'd like to come home with and say, look, we got the remaining balance of this from the state, from DEP. We're going to get these things out of here and connect you to municipal sewer.
That's great.
Yeah. So that was one of those things that just kind of bothers me, seeing our coastline there, and there's
especially in a community like that. I mean, there might be some people on fixed incomes, that really.
Some people have been in there that community since it was built.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, that sounds like good work too, for sure. I know Trump recently signed, was 2 Fridays ago, a big bill.
Seems like every time he signs something that's very, very important and helpful to everybody who lives in the United States.
Yeah,
it's he either does it himself or somebody else does it basically overrides it with some other news.
Right. I guess that speaks to the attention that Florida has been getting lately, and how important even the aspect of social media has been for our recent woes up in Lake O and the Port St. Lucie River, and the Indian River hammock and all that, because obviously it's a very important issue,
Right.
which I don't think would have been responded to as well hadn't it not been for social media, because that could have been just a thing where we talk about local areas, could have been only known really on the local level in Central Florida and Stewart and Port St. Lucie areas and things like that. But I think the fact that was on social media so much got it the attention that it deserved, really, and made a lot of headway. But we're still dealing with some issues down here in the Everglades.
Of course.
Can you maybe open up a little bit about some of the things that are ongoing things about what are happening down here, maybe some watershed issues and some things like that?
Yeah, I think if I think back as a young person growing up here, out to the Everglades once in a while on an airboat ride when relatives came in from up north, we could smell the Everglades burning if there was anything going on the east side. But outside of that, it wasn't something on a daily basis we really thought about. And as I was paying attention more and getting a little older, I do recall that seemed kind of the turning point, and I want to say it was probably under the Clinton administration. During that time, you had Congressman Clay Shaw, and at the time, I think it was probably Senator Bob Graham. Really kind of say, all right, well, this is, to our point earlier, this is the Everglades. It's not partisan. It's not political. We need to figure out how to get this done, and that's kind of where the restoration, that at that point the restoration really started to take hold. And we're going back, 25, 28 years ago. I think everybody kind of agrees how it has to happen. We've got to restore water flow properly. In the professional world, I actually put some big tank and generators in for some of these pumps, because when the Everglades was drastically changed at the turn of the century or early part of that, it was actually, ironically, Governor Napoleon Bonaparte Broward, where we get our name from. We're supposed to be Everglades County, but we're Broward County, and basically we took a lot of the water out of the Everglades to expand west. Not quite where we are right now, but if you go out to Weston and parts there, those were wetlands, and that was part of the Everglades. So we need to restore the water flow down through Tamiami, and obviously that big project is finally being lifted, so we can move the water there. There are other issues, obviously, north of the lake from the Shingle Creek and Kissimmee that are providing too much water and nutrients and other things in it. But what we're learning is, just like anything else, there's always we always try to point the finger. We always try to find someone to blame. Right. And for the longest time, it was easy to blame one specific part of the agricultural community. And what we're finding with University of Florida, Florida Atlantic University, and other university environmental science programs that have been studying this is a good part of this. It is some, I would say overdevelopment, but it's the effects of some of the development up around the Central Florida area. It's the effects of a lot of nutrients from septic tanks, sanitary sewer, things like that, or not being on sanitary sewer up north of us, and it's also not dealing with our water flow the way it needs to be. The vast majority of that $686 million that the governor had in his environmental budget is to deal with water quality issues around the Everglades. The one thing I would challenge folks to understand about kind of the big picture when they yell and scream at the TV about whether they like or don't like the president, understand one thing. Regardless of how you feel about the person, what he says on social media and all that good stuff, realize that we have a governor that can literally pick up the phone and say, hey, Hurricane Michael's still hurting our community. We need some funding for the timber industry. They were wiped out. We need some dollars for the education program, there's schools there that disappeared. And the Everglades, another one of those things. We need you to continue to put federal dollars in the Everglades. And he has his ear. All I can say to folks is that I used to make the kind of the comparison. Look, if we have a person running our school system who had a personal relationship with the previous president, then we should maximize that. It doesn't matter who that president is, whether you like them or not. If they can bring attention to us, I mean, I look at some of the issues that are going on in our country, like homelessness out in California.
Right.
Just because you don't agree with somebody doesn't mean you can't sit down calmly and have a conversation about trying to fix some of these problems. But I think the environment, the Everglades, and having an understanding and a relationship with the governor, and him understanding from day one when he came in and decided he was going to be on the side of the environment, was a good thing.
Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%. Yeah. I mean, we're at a weird spot right now as a state, to where these things need to be addressed ASAP. Yeah. Because we're almost at a tipping point with the amount of people we have coming in. And I guess, you being a construction guy, I didn't mean to cut you off, please.
No, 21 million and growing.
Yeah, 21 million. Same amount of people in all of Australia. I think they have 24 million in Australia. Isn't there like a construction moratorium happening in the Keys? Like
there was. I'm not sure where it is, but I know that there were some issues there. Look like they lost a lot of their infrastructure, and a lot of their service industry, has to get in a car and drive 2.5, 3 hours to get to work. Mm-hmm. The storms have changed a lot of that culture, but what they want to make sure that they're doing is they're not going to go back with inferior product, clearly not mobile homes, but inferior products that aren't going to withstand a storm and that aren't also efficient in the right manner.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I heard that they were going to stop construction altogether in the Keys. Is that true?
I'm not aware.
Not aware. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not.
Right. So, because I've had some people on this show that say, "Oh, we need to put a no vacancy sign in the state of Florida." With too many people. I'm like, it's so. All right, whether you feel that way or not, it's just so unrealistic.
If anybody's traveled the entire state, the one thing I've heard from friends of mine that have run statewide, for example, whether statewide legislative seat in the cabinet or for the U.S. Senate, there are so many different cultures around this state. There are so many different places around this state that you literally, you'd say names of places to people if they've never been there. So there are, if we're feeling congested and we're feeling impacted here in South Florida, Miami, and Fort Lauderdale, those may be valid points. I live east, and there's just no other place to build unless you knock an existing building down. But there are places in the state of Florida, if we do the Tallahassee drive for 6.5 hours, that there's still land all along the highway to
I-10's a long road.
Yeah, I-10 and 75 and the Turnpike. Yeah. But there are I don't think we ever say no vacancy, we're closed for business. What we should do is try to elevate the types of opportunities that we put out there in the market, and we're seeing Kerkorian and these other major financial businesses going from New York City to Miami or somewhere in South Florida, and we've got we have a tech industry down here that a lot of folks don't know. Citrix was started right here in Coral Springs out of a garage. Mm-hmm. IBM's up the road, Motorola. Now we've got Magic Leap. We've got Ultimate Software. We've got a lot of these companies that have grown here, whether in the financial or industries or technical IT technology. And the idea that we would say you're not welcome here. We're pretty much getting a gimme. We're getting a gimme from the mayor of the city of New York and the governor of the state of New York by the taxing structure they have, and New Jersey and places like that. One of the things that we accomplished in the governor's tax cut last year wasn't just the back to school or hurricane preparedness, things like that, but was a break in the tax on commercial leases. Mm-hmm. Which you're going to pay here in this, I'm sure you pay a part of it every month in this studio. It's the one complaint we have from businesses saying, why am I being taxed on a lease if I'm already paying, other components of that to run my business. So that's something we keep trying to bring down. As long as we're doing that and we're providing a clean environment and the quality of life is great here, and people can do things like be on the water, which you can't do, 60% of the year in say in New York or somewhere even if boating is your thing. If we do that and we keep the economic engine running, I think people are going to continue to move down here. And those who say we're closed for business, they forget a lot of people are come down here to retire. They live out their golden years. Now they're not here anymore.
Right.
So
that's what I was saying. Why is I think it's. I can understand how people can say no vacancy. Mm-hmm. I get it. Right.
Yeah.
Because we are almost kind of max capacity and everything, but it's really unrealistic to say it. We had Rufus Wakeman on the show recently. I don't know if you know Rufus, but in the fishing world, he's kind of like a fly fishing legend.
Okay.
Whatever 7th generation Floridian kind of thing, heir to the John Deere estate. Really cool guy. And he basically was saying, we're humans. We do this. You know what I mean? It's, we're growing. We're going to expand. It's always going to happen. You know what I mean? If we're not careful, we're going to run ourselves out of a planet. But, you just got to kind of do your best, to... Like, I'm not an overly environmental person. I'm not like Mr. Environmentalist, but I do believe in being responsible.
Yeah. No, it's our planet. We treat it right. It was funny. I watched the against my better judgment, but my mom kept texting me saying, "Are you watching the Golden Globes?" Finally, I was like, "I better turn it on in case she wants to talk about it
hilarious.
later." So everything about the fire. It was I don't know who she was, but it was one actress that she brought up the volunteer. Think about the volunteer firefighters. That was the only one that I could think of that was made sense because everything was about a climate disaster.
Right.
And I'm not going to immediately say that's what it is, but then yesterday we hear on the news that a lot of this has been started by arson. Mm-hmm. So if we want to do something, I always say that if you do something yourself and make sure that people see you doing it. Make sure that you can be leading by example. At the same time, if you have the ability to change something, then change it. Don't just go yell and scream about it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the word change because I was just actually thinking about that recently, where so many people run on that word.
Yeah.
Blindly.
Yep.
It's like, well, what does that mean? Change. Yeah. Change what? Change everything? Because I think, in a lot of ways we're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
So maybe
change just what's not working.
Yeah, just, instead of running on change, change for prosperity. Change for what? Mm-hmm. Change, end that sentence. Don't just say change, because you just want to change just to change. We're going to change ourselves out of a constitution.
This is true.
That's the part that, it's a weird word.
This is true.
But people always look at this inspirational word. But
yeah. You know what? You wonder, so there's 120 members of the Florida House. Each has 6 bill slots.
Yeah.
So that means right off the bat, that's the number of bills you're going to have. And if you think about the Senate has infinite number of bills. I'm not saying don't file them, but everything doesn't have to be a big change on something. It feels like I've only been there 1 year, but watching it for a decade or longer, you feel like both sides have to file their obligatory abortion and gun bills.
Right.
We want guns on campus. We want guns in the grocery store, guns in church, and then the other side wants, no to all those. And then it's the other social issues. And you think about the things that we can really, to your point, change. If we can all get on board to change something that makes sense for everybody, instead of trying to find the one little nugget in there that you don't like to be against it. If we can get on things just like the beach bill,
right.
Nope, just didn't have anybody against it because who would be against that?
Right, exactly. Or you can talk about the Lauderdale by the Sea thing with the septic tanks.
That's just
change.
You know
what I mean?
It's a good change.
Yeah, it's a good change. You know what I mean? But you don't necessarily have to change the way everybody thinks on that side of the aisle. That's
well, I think sometimes I think whoever's out of power and that. It's a cycle, right?
Yeah.
Washington's kind of half on one side, half on the other. But whoever's out has to figure out a way to get back in. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, "Listen, I want to go there." I don't always agree with them, but there was a representative from the Gainesville area, Ted Yoho. He said, "I'm going to do 8 years?" And he actually did the 8. He thought about doing a little more, and then he said, "No, it was a promise I made, and I'm out." So it is interesting that people want to go someplace to make a difference and as you say, quote unquote, change something. And then sometimes they just figure out how to keep getting reelected.
Have you found it to be what you expected it to be?
You know what?
Is that an unfair question?
No, it's
to
a
ask
very
you?
fair question. I've been so, part of a little bit of the mechanics is I loved being on the county commission.
Uh-huh.
I loved the work that we were able to do there. I loved working with my, 8 cities and towns and villages, whether it was Sea Ranch Lakes or Fort Lauderdale, all sizes, different issues. Working with the mayors and commissioners and council members and all that good stuff. And to the point where, we run on the county commission as with a party affiliation. So even being the guy on the other side and kind of dealing with that when it came to whether it was redistricting or whether or not they were going to let me be the, symbolic mayor of Broward County, which never happen. But whether it was that it was a great job. I mean, people don't, do my other professional life outside of that, but it paid very well. I would say that a lot of people leave the legislature, come back and run for a county commission seat wherever they live in Florida. That being said, it is everything I thought it was going to be and more, because although it's a hard place to get to, as we said, and it's inconvenient at times, and you're on the floor of the House at 2:00 in the morning arguing about immigration issues or whatever it might be. It is so refreshing to be part of a strong majority, a team that has a real good understanding of where they want to go, and not just make a point or to be ideologues on something, but to really work on issues. And Governor DeSantis has kind of been a change maker on this part of it, because typically there is a little, even if everybody up there was a Republican, for example, you're still going to have disputes or pushes between the House and the Senate. And then ultimately the governor, our past governor, Governor Scott, sometimes didn't always see eye to eye with the legislature. So all those things have to be working together. And I think the fact that Governor DeSantis came out on the environment first.
Bam.
Yeah. People sometimes said things about Governor Scott because he was laser focused on jobs. Well, we were at the largest recession since the Great Depression. We needed that.
Right.
And there are other people who would say, well, he could walk and chew gum at the same time. And this governor right off the top understood that the economy was moving forward. He wasn't going to do anything to impede that, and wanted to probably try to help it additionally, but understood that if we don't have clean water, a good environment here in Florida, and one of the things that I'm a big supporter of that not all my folks in leadership is our tourism industry. Visit Florida. I think it's something that we need to continue. People in Minnesota don't know if there's a small issue of red tide in Sarasota. They don't know where Sarasota is as opposed to Fort Lauderdale or Pompano Beach. They think the whole state of Florida is, to your point, closed for business. So we need to continue to advertise our brand, and I think we've got a governor that realizes whether it's a trade mission to Israel to bring technology here, or other things that he's doing. I think we've got a good person in the governor's mansion, and we've got strong leadership in the House and the Senate. And I think it's so for those reasons, and the ability for me to kind of have a little more say in what I'm able to accomplish. I think it's been all I thought it was going to be.
Growing up in South Florida and just being a Floridian my whole life and just being proud of Florida, I've never been more proud of my state as I am now, being how strong we are right now. I mean, this is we're always we're the Florida I always thought we could be.
Yep.
And, we teeter on that edge of maintaining, in a ways, this situation with Fort Lauderdale, at the end of the day, might be a good thing, because, sometimes people need to see, a result before they can take action. And maybe in a way, this Fort Lauderdale situation is a sacrificial lamb that makes everybody realize we need to address our sewage issues. Like you said earlier, to that point, getting rid of septic and maybe getting everyone on a current, more modern sewage program is going to be a huge benefit to our water overall, right? I mean,
no, I think if you went home and sat with your wife and you said, well, we're going to remodel the house.
Yeah.
Would you rather paint it and put a new roof and new windows on it, or would you rather take the rusty pipes out of the slab and replace them because those two things cost them. You don't want to do the one you don't see.
Right.
And sewer pipes are hard to sell. Mm-hmm. But I think the silver lining in these recent catastrophes is what these incidents that are terrible to go through. But I think it brought, to your point, it brought to the surface the fact that we do have some issues underground and we've got to address them.
Yeah,
no doubt.
I mean, it needs, and I hope people pay attention to what's going on down here. And maybe that's one of the goals of the show today is just to say, hey, that happened. Yeah, it's going to happen in other places. Address the situation.
Well, one of the things that I have
it's worth paying for.
You're right. So one of the things that I've said to people, and it goes back to partly because I had to, but at the same time, I want to, and it's the only way to get something really done is often use the hashtag working together. Mm-hmm. Well, the only way that I'm going to get something done when I was a county commissioner and I had Lamar Fisher and Jack Seiler, for example, and Bill Gantz and D.Friel and mayors that they didn't look at me as being the Republican county commissioner. They looked at me and said, well, we need to get a project done. Can you help us with it? Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, if you forget about that kind of stuff and you're on one side of the boat with a rowing and they're on the other side of the boat rowing, you get something done. So to your point, I mean, I think it's really important that we don't emulate Washington, D.C. or what happens on the national news in Florida. I think Florida, to your point, is in the best shape it's been in a long, long time. The economy is firing on all cylinders. Our port system, our airports, everything's being modernized over the period of time that we've been coming out of the recession and growing.
This is also a state that's been doing a great thing for the arts.
Yeah.
And I can speak to that directly because in some of the work that we've done with the city of Pompano Beach, and I also know a lot of the other programs that are happening, the rise of Wynwood, just as an independent thing, and a lot of the money that's being put mm-hmm. into the, if you look historically back through any society, mm-hmm. right, to really get a pulse on how things were back then, you're going to study, the innovations, and you're going to study the wars and different things like that. But if you really want to have a reflection of how the time was, you're going to look to the art. Mm-hmm. And that's why we feel that art is just an important, part of society. Whether or not, people feel that too much money is being dumped into the arts, or that's up to the guys like mm-hmm. you to really balance all that out, and the commissions and the different people to say, okay, what's appropriate, for what's being given. But Florida has always been a huge supporter of the arts and innovator of the arts. Proud to see that as well. So
yeah, we had a I get warned every time I come home, about next year's budget. I said, well, last year's budget, for example, the cultural arts capital program went from $2 million to $22 million. So it was over, 11-fold.
Wow. Wow.
That being said, I've got some good friends in the arts here that would remind me that it should be 80 to 100 million.
Right. So, right.
I come home with great news, and
at the end of the day, and just for the record, just to back up my statements, I'm a small business owner, mm-hmm. so I take things from that perspective. Mm-hmm. I'm not just an artist looking for handouts, so I can make a living. What I mean? We're self-sufficient here. And I look at things from that standpoint as a conservative small business owner.
But if you look at, Pompano Beach is, my wife was born and raised in Pompano Beach, and, if you didn't ask me to plug, but I'm going to say, if you're in your boat, you cruise down the Intracoastal, you'll see your artwork on the bridge. I mean, you'll see all that, the sails on the bridge, mm-hmm. the pier reconstruction, the fish sculptures all around Pompano Beach. I mean, it all kind of ties together. And it makes you feel, like you're in a special place. Lauder by the Sea, the same thing. Deerfield Beach is doing some good public projects down on the waterfront. So, I mean, we've kind of finally gotten to a place where if you were a kid that grew up going to, say, New England on the little beaches along Maine or mm-hmm. New Hampshire or Massachusetts, it's kind of like that in Broward County. You can go to a little waterfront pier community in Lauder by the Sea and Pompano Beach and Deerfield Beach, and Fort Lauderdale's a little bigger, but it has its charm. And you go south to Hollywood and other places there, and other folks have some good things going on. So it's we've got plenty of room. Yeah, the sign says we're wide open for vacation and business. Just be come down and bring your business, bring your family.
Yep. I had a question for you.
Bring your boat too.
Yeah, bring your boat for sure. Buy bait. We support some of the same organizations: Freedom Fighter Outdoors, Special Olympics. Mm-hmm. and I think that's an important thing to kind of bring up too, is a lot of the advocacy work that you've done, throughout your career. It's extremely admirable. One of the things that you've also done, maybe not, to the charitable standpoint, but more the functionality standpoint with the oceanographic radar system in Port Everglades you developed. Can you elaborate on that? Because I thought that was interesting. I did a little bit of research before you came on. I'm like, all right, you find out some more things that, some things to talk about. And I found that out, and I didn't realize that had happened. Was this like 2018? It
was right. It was actually right
new,
before I left the county commission. It was some early in 18. It's down around Terminal 29, kind of on the Dania Cutoff Canal.
Yeah.
They put in some instrumentation that monitors the conditions at Port Everglades. It's taken into a lot of federal data. It's a little out of my little out of my wheelhouse as far as the technology there, but just like the sign that says we're open for business, we're also open to be part of what's going on with both science and the federal government and gathering the right data. We also have.
Because I never realized that we had to pull our data from, where was it, Lake Worth?
Yeah.
Or Miami.
Yeah. So I mean, as we talk about, and it's funny, as we talk about sea level issues, which I'm a big believer in, we need to come up with a comprehensive plan to do these things. And I'll give you an example. If we're going to take the water, the sewer pipes out of the ground and replace them, we just had a project in the town of Hillsborough Beach had a project. They were doing their water line themselves, and then the county was doing their sewer line. And I'm thinking to myself, you've got one road in this town. Mm-hmm. You're going to dig it up. You're going to make it impossible for people to get home and out their driveway and back and forth over bridges, get off the barrier island. If you're digging it up, let's do both lines, because they were off by like 6 months to a year.
Oh, really?
So even if you have to wait with the water line, or the county has to expedite the sewer line, do them at the same time. Mm-hmm. So you think about some of these projects, it's just a matter of getting some folks in the room. So to that point, I think if you're going to take up the lines underground, it might be the same time you want to start dealing with, if they're in coastal areas or by canals, deal with the sea level, the sea wall issues.
Right.
So when you talk about data coming from Port Everglades, I was kind of a Port Everglades geek. Just because that was one of those areas, like, this thing is not political.
Right.
It does a ton of business. It's the number one container port in the state of Florida. It did 35 billion in overall goods in and out. I mean, it's number 2 petroleum port. So I became really interested in all the different businesses running there. While I was commissioner, Governor Scott approved a program with DOT where they raised Eller Drive. Mm-hmm. They built a new railroad inside the port. So it was really like a federal, state, and local government project where we can get cargo from the ships out of the port without having to stop traffic and do all that stuff. So what was really interesting was using that economic engine, the port, for example, as an opportunity. So Nova Southeastern was right there at the mouth of Port Everglades, and I think that for a long time they were looking for someone to give them a lot of money to name the building, but obviously Guy Harvey Research. I mean, it was kind of right under their nose, right? I mean, they're doing shark research there and other things, but the bigger part of that is when we have issues on the beach, for example. Turtle monitoring, dealing with all those things, and you're thinking you go out for public procurement. Who should do this work? We have the turtle scientists right down the street.
Right.
So having an institution, for example, like that, studying the coral reefs, we should know whether we're using the right or wrong sunscreen. We shouldn't allow our city council members or commissioners tell us we can no longer use sunscreen, so let's everybody get cancer. Let's figure out what kind we can use.
Yeah.
And that way, we're not hurting the reefs. At the same time, we're not going to put ourselves in jeopardy. So I think having engines like Port Everglades and the airport and some of the other educational facilities close to us here, we're gonna be able to use some of this data. I'll get one more example. For example, the shark research. FAU has a student up at their K-12 program, A.D. Henderson School, which is a young lady. She's I think a sophomore in high school, and she's created an antimicrobial Band-Aid from using the shark skin,
Really?
which basically apparently doesn't get bacteria. You know, it's again above my pay grade, but here's using the science right down the street and sharing it with between two universities and then all the way down to a 11th grader in a high school. Mm-hmm. So I think having that here is important.
Do you get involved at all in fisheries management or legislation over that ever?
You haven't, but
Yeah.
you know, one of the things I think that is, you know, we've got to look at things as they are, and then as they might be able to become. In other words, if DEP, Florida FWC would be kind of over that, but as a legislator, there's no reason why I have a relationship with a couple of the members of FWC, talk about those issues. So I mean, if there's something that is of concern for you and the community, that's, you know, open door. I mean, one of the things that I can say with pride is that, you know, we have an open door policy. We have folks that if they want to reach out from a different district or something like that, we want to talk to people who have issues.
Okay. No, that's great. I mean, that's great to know that, because I know we bring up a lot of those issues here on the show from time to time.
Yeah, you brought up some nonprofits that are near and dear to my heart. They're great ones that kind of pull at your heartstrings, like Broward Children's Center and Special Olympics and things that we can do for organizations where, you know, people clearly need, you know, our help and outside help. And then there's organizations that you know, came to be because somebody wanted to do the right thing for those who did things for us. And you brought up like Freedom Fighter Outdoors, and Vinny's a neighbor of mine. And so he for years was doing, you know, at the generosity of Jimmy Buffett using the boat, taking, you know, wounded warriors out fishing and then hunting and doing the same thing up in New York, to the point where he got so big, you know, he'd take all these boats would leave out of Lighthouse Point Marina, and I'd go over and say hello to them. Typically they were kind of on a Tuesday, and we had a commission meeting, so I'd be the only guy wearing a tie, and you know, they were all ready to go fishing. But a couple times I did go, and it's life changing for some of those guys, because you don't realize, you know, physically they may not have any scars. And, you know, there was one time that I'd asked about a gentleman that was, you know, a wounded warrior that was a year before, and, you know, Vinny told me, you know, he took his life. So you think, you know, some of these things, it's going to change someone's life, you know, and you have to keep, you know, these are the things you have to keep doing. Yep. And we've got so many people in this community, Ryan Owens run that they do in Deerfield, and, you know, remembering veterans, things like that. So there's a lot of things that people can do to get involved, and, you know, whether it's a dune planting and, you know, in Pompano Beach, which can be doing a bunch, or working with veterans, or whatever your interest is.
You know, I think that's a thing an important thing to bring up. Like, you know, the FFO is like our main organization that we support here on the show, in the studio. We work hand in hand with Vinny and Sarah. They do great work. We're more than proud to be involved with them. I personally got exposure fishing my first event with them, this last event, and really, you know, working closer with the veterans. I brought a couple of veterans on the show, Anthony and Ed. And, you know, you can say, you know, I mean, the financial support is great, but what these guys really need is the interaction and just knowing that people are there to support them, because a lot of them are teetering on a razor's edge. Unfortunately.
And it's a situation where they won't say anything.
Right.
They won't ask for help. I mean, whether it's a veteran of, you know, World War II or a veteran of Iraq or Afghanistan, things are very different today. But there's also still a common thread where it's not something you talk about. I work with a couple veterans that have been doing, create an opportunity for veterans to find great opportunities for work, you know, employment opportunities, different areas where they might not normally have a network of people to get to be able to interview for a job or things like that. And, you know, some of that, it's interesting. I have a big flag in my office in the Capitol, and it's embroidered with Camp Aramati on it, and was from a friend of mine who was actually Gibbons grad, Ian Bamman, who he had been over with the United States Army, came back, worked in the insurance industry, and he wanted to go back and serve. So he was part of the Washington State National Guard and went back over, and he brought the flag with me from his company. And
That's great.
It just, people always ask, did you serve? And you know what, I didn't, I would have liked to. I didn't. I'm not ashamed of the fact that I didn't, but I am proud of the fact that I can make sure that people see that flag and let them know that, there are a lot of great veterans in our community, and we've got to continue to make sure that we create opportunities for them. And that quote unquote little fishing trip for the day makes a difference in someone's life.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
It certainly does. And also, a lot of people will look to the government to solve all your problems. Don't do that.
No.
Solve your own problems, think locally first, you know what I mean? Make differences in your community, support organizations like the Special Olympics, the Freedom Fighters Outdoors, or someone, that supports the veterans, that truly supports the veterans, not just tries to exploit the veterans. That's really probably the more important thing to say, because there are organizations, unfortunately, out there like that. And, try to make a difference in your local community.
I agree with you.
But
I think the most important thing you said is don't look to the government can assist with it. A successful government will be a government that has a good set of services in a safety net.
Yeah.
And it's exactly that. It's a safety net.
Right.
The government can't solve all our problems. I mean, I would say that, if I could be a little kitschy, it was that I got involved in government because for the most part, some of it I didn't trust. I didn't trust they were doing it the right way or the best way. And not that I have all the answers, but I'm going to go out and do my best to try to make sure that, someone is keeping an eye on some of these things.
Yeah, that's
much
great.
of it. So.
Yeah, and we're proud to have you in that position.
Thanks,
Certainly.
I appreciate it.
Real quick, I don't ask gotcha questions on the show, but I am going to ask you one.
Okay.
Because I promised a mutual friend of ours that I would.
Uh-oh.
So, what's your favorite local restaurant to eat at?
Well, there's only one that has the Chips Relentless Oysters. So I love me some Papa's Raw Bar.
There we go.
And they have my brother-in-law's wine on the list, Dariush.
Yeah.
And then it would be, so for the days I don't want to have that casual atmosphere and I want to button up a little bit, Daryl and Oliver's Cafe Max.
Yep. Awesome.
So,
there you go.
I don't think I've left Lighthouse Point or Pompano in those two.
Yeah, very cool. I want to give a special shout out to Chuck Faust and Bill May,
Nice.
Who was instrumental in us meeting and getting together. I want to thank you very much for coming on and giving us your time today.
Absolutely.
It
it's
truly,
my pleasure.
truly really means a lot to us. It means a lot to me personally. And John. Right, John? John, you haven't said a word all day.
John's doing an awesome job.
Busy with notes like always.
Notes, so I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for truly becoming connected by water with us.
I appreciate it.
We're gonna
appreciate your work too. I mean, it's nice to see local success stories and not just the pleasing on the eyes and inspiring artwork, but the fact that you call yourself a small business owner and you're keeping the economy moving forward. And if anybody who listens to this podcast needs to get a hold of us, so we talked about social media a little bit, you and I, and at Chip LaMarca or at Chip LaMarca, Facebook or Twitter. I've been told I'm kind of a tweener in between.
Yeah,
I've been told I need to use Instagram more often too, and that's at Chip LaMarca as well.
Yeah, I need to get better at that.
So I just you and I communicated to set this interview up via Facebook. So anything we can do for you, we'll connect you back to the office if it's a state issue, and if it's a county issue, we can help you there too.
That's amazing. I want to just listen. Give my best to Governor DeSantis. We always say that he's. John's gonna laugh at me because I'm like a DeSantis nut. I really am. I think the guy's gonna be president one day. But my goal is to hopefully one day he wants to be a guest on the show. So, Governor Ron, come on the show.
So I would end with this and say that probably one of the most important. I wouldn't say because the governor's got to be the most important person in Tallahassee, but probably very, very close to that is the chief of staff, who is a born and raised Broward County product, Shane Strum, who's a dear friend, a predecessor of mine with local politics, and we will definitely put a request in, and whether he can come to the studio or you can go to him. The governor spends a lot of time in Broward County. Obviously, he was out Everglades Holiday Park dealing with the python issue, and,
right.
He said he needed some new boots, so I guess I'll have some python boots when I see him next.
We'll get him a Connected by Water shirt.
Yeah, so that, absolutely. I think the more he learns about what makes our part of the state and our part of the water unique, the better he'll be at his job. So we'll try to get him down here and get him in the studio.
Awesome. Very cool.
Awesome.
Chip LaMarca, representative, the great state of Florida. We're proud to have you. Thank you very much. And we're going to end with saying your ego is not your amigo. It's do your best and let God do the rest. Right? Always remember to eat, drink, and be local. Always buy all your vehicles at Joey Accardi, Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, Subaru. Did it.
Nice.
Right? And no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, we're always connected by water. Chip LaMarca, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis.